All right, welcome back, everybody, after a little break. We are planning on going over to the meeting in a couple hours, in a little over an hour, being the Now What Cafe. And I'm just noticing a feeling that I'm experiencing, which is, it's like, it's sort of a disturbing feeling. It's a feeling of being lost on the one hand, and also a feeling of letting go. And the letting go has some like sadness associated with it. You know, here's what's bringing it on. I just want to share with everybody where I'm coming from, and then I'd love to hear everyone's, feedback or your feelings or whatever you want to share. But I guess I'm realizing that what we have put together and what we're bringing to the table, I'm just starting to see how small that is, right? In comparison to the whole. And I used to have a lot more ego and attachment around, this is the way, and we've got, this is it, and everyone just kind of needs to follow us. And now I'm letting go of that. And I'm embracing, a much more, I'm just embracing an experience of the world where we really all need each other, and all of us have really great contributions to make. And there are many communities forming here, there, and everywhere, and we just need to come together, but without any like hierarchy that says, hey, this is the way, everybody follow this, right? Or this, but more, let's all just get together and share and learn from each other. And we have this beautiful saying in Spanish in Mexico that goes, sobre el camino se acomodan las calabazas. And it translated means along the way, the pumpkins will settle. And, what it convey, you imagine just throwing a bunch of pumpkins in the back of the pickup truck and then just let them settle. Don't try to like stack them perfectly when you're putting them in there. Just put them in there however they land, and they'll settle along the way. And that's kind of how I feel about collective superintelligence, and more broadly, what we all need to do together beyond collective superintelligence. And that in the process of us getting together and forming these connections, like with Ben Roberts, like in a way, like part of my ego, like took a hit when I said, all right, let's, go over to that other Now What meeting and leave this meeting, right? And that for me was kind of like it feels like an important part of my like letting go of my previous attachments to, the, kind of radish centric view of the universe that I used to have. Anyway, I just wanted to share that with you all. I kind of feel like I'm just sort of being vulnerable and just sharing, something that's, I feel unsettled and unsettling, and, I'm just kind of going with it,
No need to come to any conclusions yet, Jamin. We haven't been there yet, and you'll see. I mean, it's research, right? It's exploratory, and you got to dip your toes in, see how,
Oh, no. I totally get what you're saying, and I totally agree, Emery. I'm just kind of coming from a whole different level that's more like emotional and inner child and ego and letting go. Because, regardless of what we experience with Now What, and regardless of what we experience with whatever other communities that we come into contact with, my point doesn't depend upon any of those. My point is kind of deeper, more profound for me, which is that I used to kind of think I knew how we need to move forward and how all this needs to happen. And now I'm letting go of that in favor of the collective intelligence figuring it out.
Well, that's
And
positive.
for me, it's very positive. It's just also, there's like some pain. My ego is taking a hit. And you know what? Let it, so be it. Let my ego take some more hits. I need to get, I mean, I think it kind of feels to me like this is part of the process of us going from a species of individuals to a species of one, not one individual, but one colony, one united colony, like an ant colony or a bee colony, right? Where it's really about, you know, what's in the best interests of the whole, and individuals will sacrifice for the whole. And I think that's urgently needed now. Right now, we've been doing, up until now, in the last 10,000 years, we've been doing the opposite. The individual has been hoarding at the expense of the whole, right? And what we need now are for individuals willing to sacrifice for the benefit of the whole of life on Earth.
You know, Jamin, I want to make a comment about that, because I wanted to do that before, but you were in a few meetings back, because you were talking about that, and well, there wasn't an opportunity to comment about it. And so, you know, because you were talking about people being more like an ant colony. So first of all, actually, I think people really are a lot like an ant colony. If you really look at how people, yeah, if you actually like look that up from space, you would see that humans do organize themselves very much like that. Different ant colonies fight with one another. They, you know, they do have, well, let's just say they simply look a lot like that. Like if you were like, if you just from within, it looks like we have all this sophisticated and, um, yeah, basically, if you were to distance yourself, you would see that our cities look a lot like ant colonies. We function very much like that.
Can
And
I
the other,
just,
well, hold on.
okay, no, just
Okay.
like a super minor clarifying point.
All right, well, go ahead.
Okay,
Go on.
so you said ant colonies fight each other, but do they fight internally? Back to you.
Yeah, they do. Actually, they do. Well, you know, I'm not an expert on ant colonies, but I know that like, um, yeah, they have, yeah, they're not perfect, and that's the other thing that I wanted to say is, they're not. Uh, Wait, what was it? The other thing is that, yeah, I think you should be careful with idealizing them. Uh, yeah, they're not actually as efficient as I think you make it seem. That they have their own mechanisms, and um, but yeah, I wish I was making that comment back before, because I had more thoughts about it. Um, yeah, but basically humans are a lot like ants, and they're not, ants are not as efficient as we idealize them to be, because they're so foreign to us. To us, they look so foreign from looking at them from the outside versus looking at ourselves from the inside. They seem so different. And but like the queen, I don't think she actually, it's not like she gives orders. She just breeds, to my understanding. She just makes more ants, you know? But the other ant, actually, I'd say that the ants are working on some kind of their own market mechanisms, you know, some, uh, however market forces play themselves out with their own signals. It serves to organize them to make it look like they have some kind of a collective or central planning. But I think they're actually just simply, each ant is making its own decisions for itself, and when that all adds up, it makes it look like they're being, they have some kind of a collective intelligence. And they do, and they actually do that. So they do, but it's not as, uh, probably it's not as clever as we think it is. It's probably really just, it's not like each ant is thinking about what's the best for the colony. I'd say that each ant is just making a decision within its own programming, within its own naturally evolved programming. It's just making decisions for itself. It's just probably for the survival of the species, they've developed like a strong sense of community, and maybe a strong, or a weak sense of self, or something, or basically they're still, when they're acting towards the colony, they're still acting selfishly from a subjective perspective. They just see, they're just motivated by slightly different drives, but they're still you know, self, they're motivated by the self. I mean, I think that's the fundamental of psychology, of essentially any neurological system, is that anything that has a subjective perspective, it's driven by that subjective perspective, and maximizing the experience of the quality of experience of that subjective perspective. And to us, it ends up looking, but and then again, when you look at humans, you know, when you look at humans, how humans go to war, you look at all these humans dying in war. You know, if you were studying humans as if, you know, if you were an alien, you'd be like, wow, look at all these humans that are sacrificing themselves just for the capitalist ants, for the capitalist humans to, you know, to sell more, to make more money on weapons, you know. So no, I'm kind of joking, but it kind of, if you look at humans from a distance, it also looks like humans are acting like ants. So yeah, and you know, actually, I would say that that's a very anthropocentric perspective to try to talk about how other species make them out to be so different, because by trying to make them out to be so different, essentially we're saying that we're different and we're better in our own way. But it's like, you know, because people have all these, if you look at dogs, people ask, like, there are all these people who have hypotheses about, like, why dogs pee on fire hydrants, you know, that they're marking their territory and blah, blah, and it's some kind of a complicated, you know, communication network. But why do dogs pee on fire hydrants? For the same reason that I pee on trees. I just don't want the wind to blow directly into me, so I pee all over myself because it's disgusting. That's why dogs pee on fire hydrants. They just don't want the wind to blow and pee on them. But people look at it and be like, oh no, it's got to be some kind of instinctive thing because they're dogs and they're different. But no, they're actually doing it for the same reason that we are. Like 99% of the time, if you really analyze the psychology. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that up to you.
All right, well, you've totally bubbled up a lot of stuff for me. And so let's say in the case of the human, you know, soldier who's sacrificing, and that's very much like a soldier ant sacrificing themselves for the good of the colony. In the human's case, the colony is the country, and they're fighting against another country. So you could then ask, you know, what is the unit within which we're optimizing for? What is the context, right? Which I know you know a lot about. Context and perspective and all that. So, so what I'm suggesting is, what if we redefined the context to be the whole world and all of humanity, and that we, you know, the ants send signals to each other, they're coordinating, but see, they have a central mission. I would submit that the unit of biology, you know, just like with me, what is the unit of, it's the person, right? I could say, no, it's the cell. It's the cell. I could take cells out of any part of my body, put them in a petri dish, and they can survive and thrive and all that good stuff. Emery's stepping away. Got it, Emery? We'll see you back here shortly. No need to apologize. So, you know, obviously the unit is the person, it's the individual, even though my cells could be self-sustaining as individual organism, like single cell bacteria. This is a federation of cells. Well, what if we took it to the next level and created a federation of humanity? And so, you know, just as if I'm working on a specific project for a specific outcome, I might even sacrifice certain parts of my body in terms of wear and tear or strain, or, you know, wearing out skin, getting a callus. Fortunately, my body is self-regenerating, so it's a bad analogy. But, you know, what if humanity were to optimize for the whole of the world, and rather than slice and dice the earth into individual properties? I'm just saying, what if? And what I don't want to do is have an argument or a debate about, well, it's been tried before. What I'm suggesting actually has not been tried before. What I'm suggesting is that we optimize for the whole using collective superintelligence, a sufficiently maxed out form of collective superintelligence so that it includes everyone, and is therefore, and is fundamentally democratic in some form or other. And I don't know whether it's sociocracy or holacracy or ILPocracy or whatever, but democratic in some form or another, but that optimizes for the whole. And I mean, for me, it's just it's like it's self-evident at this point that we need to do that, or this ship is going to keep going down fast. And in the case, but I think the bee colony with the bee dance on honeybee democracy. There's a book by that title which you may know of. It's an excellent book, and it's a great example of collective intelligence among insects. But I think they really strike the balance, because each bee expresses what they think is a good solution. Each bee that's gone out and scouted out a certain solution will dance in favor of that solution, much as in Agora, you dance numerically in favor of, you signal which ideas you like the best. They signal which potential new locations for the next ant colony. You're saying, huh?
Actually, I'm here dancing for you, Jamin. I'm the bee that's dancing for you. The reason I'm here talking about it is to bring you, just like that bee is trying to, with its dance, bring you to the next location of food. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm dancing for you, and I have to, say it over and over until, and the bee has to keep dancing over and over until the other bees start to follow its dance. And then they fly away and then check it out, and more bees dance. So,
yeah.
So the bee analogy is actually me talking, trying to.
I get it. I get it, Cesare. So let's stay in this conversation right now, because I think it's a great one. And in that and in the case of the bees don't like arm wrestle with each other or try to hoard more honey than the other in order to have more power in the conversation. It's the ideas. I like the way you said it earlier. It's the ideas that are competing, and viciously so, but not the people. The people are cooperating in bubbling up the best ideas, in debating and discussing, right? And so if we can agree on the context, and that's a huge part of the challenge, is getting humanity to agree on anything. And I think the ultimate agreement is to agree to work together to save life on Earth in a way that elevates the needs of the whole as a whole. In this case, it's actually binary. Are we going to go extinct or not? I say that we put not just humans, but most of complex life, if we let this thing run away out of control, which we are doing presently. But if we continue to do so, it's binary. Do we let all of complex life go extinct in an extreme in order to honor a previous supposition, which is that the freedom of the individual is paramount, right? And that the freedom of Bill Gates to hoard, vast quantities of land and do whatever the bleep he wants on those. And yes, I know there's a way to mitigate that, which is to say, well, why don't we vote for laws on land use and land use policy and water use policy and emissions? I totally get all that. But in the end, that to me sounds like trying to restrain a rabid, vicious bulldog who wants to bite everyone in the balls that he can and spread rabies to everyone, and, let there be no more non-rabid human beings on Earth, and trying to restrain that bulldog. That's what it ultimately feels like to me, because if left up to the individual will make whatever land that they own their playground and extract what they want to extract out of it. And for me, that is at the heart and the root of what's destroying us right now, is that individuals are optimizing for what they perceive to be their interests. And, it's simply, and there's so many good things about that system. Don't get me started. It's because of capitalism that we have this. I get all that. And it's super efficient. I get all that too. But the net result of all of the decisions and choices and actions which are taken under that system, playing that game by those rules, has been and continues to be ongoing destruction. We're now in the 6th mass extinction, exponential planetary overheating. I could make a long laundry list. And I'm not saying that's all the fault of capitalism, but what I am saying is that we need a new game whose context is the whole, and that humanity become, and instead of saying like an ant colony, I'm going to say like Jamin's idealized conceptualization of an idealized ant colony, right? So I'm just going to call that, you know, I cubed, idealized ant colony. So an I cubed ant colony, I think we can become like an I cubed ant colony, where we're optimizing for the whole. We're all, included in that optimization are making sure that everyone is nourished, right? Adequately nourished.
I disagree with you.
Okay, happy to hear you out, but let me just complete my thought. And where the optimization for the whole includes optimizing for every human being being well nourished, having shelter, and having, you know, basic needs met. And part of that is the basis for a new platform, a new modality of a united humanity that says, look, there's a new deal here on the table. We're essentially doing away with private property. Now, this is an ideal that I don't think we're ready for yet, but I think we can get to through an evolution of collective superintelligence. But an ideal where there essentially is no private property other than perhaps individual dwellings or something like that. But land would be not owned by any human, but definitely managed by a humanity governed in turn by a collective superintelligence and appropriate governance structures. That's where I say I don't know whether it's holacracy or sociocracy. My gut is that it's some new form of democracy which optimally leverages collective superintelligence, but that as a whole, being literally orders of magnitude more collectively intelligent than we are today, just by any measure, literally orders of magnitude more capable at generating solutions, we could optimize to the nth degree land use of all the land that's out there. Everything that's currently privately owned or owned by a government or owned by a corporation or owned by whatever, a church, whatever, that land, its use can be optimized, right? It's obvious. I mean, that's just stating the obvious. Now, how do you determine that optimal solution? Well, the answer to me is obvious to that too. It's collective superintelligence, which includes global modeling of solutions, etc. There is an optimal solution out there. Is it possible for humanity to snap to it and do it? Not in our present form, but I think in a more advanced form that we can get to through collective superintelligence, I think we can get to the state where we're ready for that. Anyway, back to you, Cesare.
You know, what I'd like to say is I think I don't know how to put it quite yet, but I think a really great to overcome the ego is to focus on profit. People, I think, basically capitalism is a great way to overcome the ego. A capitalist, if they're entering a business venture, they don't care if they get they don't mind being, when a capitalist finances, an entrepreneur or a business owner or whatever, an inventor, they don't care that they're not the person who invented. The inventor is really driven by the ego.
Can I do a quick interjection? And I think these are valuable, and I invite you to do the same, if I may. A quick interjection just to clarify something, super important, and then I'll let you continue.
Okay.
All right. In that case, what they're optimizing for is the firm. It's the individual company, right? And they will optimize for that at the expense of the whole. Whereas what I'm saying is expand the scope from the individual firm to the whole, do a similar letting go of ego, and go anyway. But back to you. And here's the thing: I actually am not interested in a conversation that talks about the benefits of capitalism, because I understand the benefits of capitalism. I've studied it, and I could go on and on, but I've really looked deeply into it, and I understand it. I'm not arguing with any of that. So I'm actually not willing to have a conversation about the benefits of capitalism.
Well, I'm talking about the psychological aspect of it.
Nor am I interested in talking about any aspect of capitalism, whether psychological, spiritual, any aspect. I'm just not willing. I'm not willing to do that.
I think you have a really big ego, Jamin. And what I'm trying to say is, if you were more of a capitalist, you would have a lesser ego. I'd like you to focus more on making money and not on your ego.
I hear you. I hear you. And I'm just setting my own boundaries as to what, I'm willing to discuss and not on this program, right? On your meetings, if the topic comes up, hey, happy to go with the flow. But not here. Because the thing is, the conversation about optimizing for the whole as a whole presupposes a fundamental prerequisite, which is that capitalism was evaluated and rejected on the basis of what is now just extremely obvious, that and again, I'm not going to pin the tail of the donkey on capitalism itself, but on a system of hoarding where an individual can own land and do whatever they want with that land. Yes, respecting laws, I understand that, but it's still up to them for them optimizing for their own limited objective function, rather than the world optimizing the entirety of the world as a whole for the benefit of the whole. And for those who haven't done that analysis and come to that conclusion, they're simply not ready for a conversation about what's next. And it's as simple as that.
I think you have a very limited understanding of what capitalism is, or what a capitalist does. A capitalist just is trying to be efficient. But then what they do with the results of that efficiency, that they can be very generous. A capitalist is simply trying to accumulate as much or generate as much wealth as they can, so that they can use it in the best way that they see fit. So, and
which is the wrong way. See, it's always up to the individual. What's the best way for me that I see fit to deploy this money? It's always up to the individual and their interests. Or if they say, well, I want to, invest, donate to this nonprofit, right? That's because, and that nonprofit, by definition, it's the whole game is just fundamentally screwed. And like I'm saying, I'm simply not willing to have a conversation to either prove that or debate that or anything else. This conversation here presupposes that that the system that got us here is a failure for reasons that have been articulated gazillions of times. So I don't need to rehash that. I'm just saying I'm not willing to go back intellectually on that one and go so far back into such a fundamental prerequisite. And that's not to diminish anyone who is pro-capitalist. It's simply to point out that there is a certain evolutionary pathway that this particular program is on, an evolutionary trajectory. And it's definitely away from a system of private property and hoarding and individuals making choices about their own assets and what to do with their own assets. That's exactly what's gotten us into this mess, is 8 billion actors, each optimizing for their own individual objective function. And the result has been a holistic catastrophe, which is almost done. We're almost dead. And so I'm just saying, this meeting here, this series, the Solution Club, is for folks who are beyond that stage of analysis?
What I'm trying to communicate to you is that nobody is beyond that. Everyone is doing everything for the self. I know that, and that allows me to function in, let's say, well, I know my own self-interest. I understand that everything is about me. And you are also working for the self, but I think your ego is not letting you to see how you're actually working for the self. You're saying you're working for the collective, but it's really
No. Okay, so let me be clear. Yes, I agree with you that I'm working for what I think is best. I am making my own choices here. I'm not following someone else's script. I'm doing what I think is best. What I'm merely suggesting is that each of us pursuing what we think is best for ourselves to do, which I totally believe in. I totally believe everyone should be free to do whatever the heck they want. Is, you know, obviously within the whatever constraints of laws, but all I'm saying, Cesare, is that the framework for the game that humanity needs to be playing here on Earth needs to be radically different from a frame of private property and free market neoliberalism, et cetera, et cetera.
maybe that's a political question. So we should do politics.
All right, I want to welcome Stephen, who's just joined us. Welcome, Stephen. We're recording. All right, we're recording again, and we've been having an interesting conversation about, you know, imagine what for me are really two bookend extremes. One is a capitalist system, a free market neoliberal system where any individual can own as whatever they want and make whatever decisions, yada yada. The classic free market, private property capitalist model. That's one bookend. And the other bookend is something which I don't think humanity is quite ready for yet, but I think we can get ready for quickly with the exponential evolution of collective superintelligence. And that is a system where the choices, the decisions about what's going to be done on any given parcel of land is not up to the owner of that land, because ownership would essentially be abolished or radically transformed in this other bookend. But rather, what happens to land is what's globally optimal, right? And that presupposes a global optimal, which I think we can get very close to between computer modeling, which is quite sophisticated in the year 2020, but most importantly, within the context of exponential collective superintelligence, I think we can get to a place where we can actually determine what is optimal, right? And then what happens on any given parcel of land is what's optimal for the whole, part of the global optimal, right? Including letting whole swaths of land go back to nature with no human intervention. Others can have, you know, holistic land management where there is human intervention, but it's toward, you know, optimizing for the whole of Mother Earth and all species, not just our own. And so anyway, those for me are the two bookends. So we've been talking about that, and anyway, I feel complete about that conversation, but I just want to acknowledge where we're coming from at the moment. And in terms of where we're going, in 42 minutes, we're going to take a field trip from this Zoom meeting to the series Now What, run by Ben Roberts. Have you heard of that one? Okay, well, here, I'll post the link in the chat. And let's see. And that'll start at 4 o'clock. Okay, all right, there it is. The link is there at the bottom. Um, so, and now what has this whole series of conversations that's been going on for the last couple of weeks and will go until I think May 1st or something like that. And it's part of what I see as this growing network of different conversations and communities that is extremely fragmented and which needs to come together as the basis for a planetary collective superintelligence, in my view. So anyway, we'll take that field trip at 4 o'clock, and then we'll come back here after that. Those of us who wish to, of course, I'll certainly come back here. And but I've heard good things about Ben Roberts. Haven't been in a meeting with him yet, and so today will be the first time. But I'm really interested to see his perspectives on all this, and you know, how do we form, in my mind, a federation of these different communities, right? Each of which is grappling with a different, you know, set of problems and opportunities. Some the full big picture, others are very focused on, you know, some topic or other like permaculture or urban planning or solar radiation management or veganism or whatever. And, you know, ultimately we need the biggest possible planetary network of conversations spanning all of these topics to form the, you know, the planetary brain, the collective superintelligence that's been so much of the focus of these meetings. Go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, there's a lot of different, you know, interesting things that kind of came up in the world of collaboration, but also I'm going to step into the space of your idea of a future world post-capitalism. And, you know, the respect, how did capitalism come to be, was a unified way of communicating exchange and value. And it is a stripped down, the value proposition, the values of the proposition were stripped down to make it flexible and streamlined. But what we're witnessing is without boundaries, it bleeds over in many harsh and unintended ways, or sometimes intended. The perspective of the challenge perspective we have is we have these policies that can turn it, you know, people's fear, and it's a reasonable fear, is policies that are based around it, you know, it's for your own good. And we're seeing more implementations of it's for your own good policies. And, you know, people are really going, well, who are you? And there's lots of reasons why people, you know, lots of excuses that come up. Well, because the challenge we have is that we're all on the same spaceship. And I think we're kind of like thinking, you know, it's a big spaceship, and it allows for a lot of autonomous behavior, but it's still our spaceship. It's not your spaceship. It's not my spaceship. It's our spaceship. And and we'll need to really have architectures of thinking and policy that really respects that this is a shared spaceship. So, you know, you dump C8 on your land. Next thing you know, it's in the bloodstreams of 98% of the population in the world, which is true. That's a true example, which is, you know, so here's this carcinogen, and thank you very much for just being careless with it. So I you know, this adds a layer of challenges that will be interesting to overcome. The other thing coming into is where we're trying to navigate an expanded world of knowledge. And what I loved about where you were going with this field trip, but also about the idea of all these meetings, Zoom meetings, and all these ideas and all these things, and they're all happening in their own little pods. And, you know, you're recording it, which is beautiful. I love the idea of archiving. We've no idea where our humanity's going. and you know, the best thing we can do is just record it, so when someone else comes along and said, how did this get this way, and they go, oh. Well, maybe we shouldn't do it that way. So the so I mean, so this really gets into a world of where we're really respecting certain roles of people. One of the most underappreciated roles, I think, in our time, besides sociologists, are librarians. And you know, librarians, when they deal with these knowledge problems, they're about creating taxonomies to create in common forms of navigation. You know, I mean, because now we're going beyond Dewey Decimal, you know, but I mean, there's an interesting, you know, muse, life coach, therapist role in the librarian of helping you achieve your goal through the guidance of navigating the sea of information. And the librarian may not know a segment of the library, but she knows, or he knows, the next librarian that knows that other section and can do these interesting handoffs. And so that's a very creative space. But they're just the, like, you know, the early colonizers went to the Indians to navigate them across the Americas, and unfortunately not for their benefit, but the you know, these librarians will be those guides through the wilderness of information. And so I think, you know, when we start enveloping these things, you're really thinking about, it's not just about architecting policies, it's not just about architecting boundaries, it's also architecting what are the potent roles we need to go forward into this new world, this new space. I am complete. Thank you very much for listening.
Brilliant, Stephen. Love everything you say, man. And welcome, Michael. Great to see you in Connecticut, if memory serves me well. All right. And welcome, sweetheart. Did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I just wanted to ask.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah, ask away. What do you got?
Can I just check how many times you called Ida last night?
Yeah.
Maybe. Thanks. Thank you.
Okay. So here's how I'm framing it. Is the new collective superintelligence. Here, let me just screen share real quick, because this will help. Michael, great to see you. Welcome back. James is over in Ireland, and it's getting late there, and I appreciate your hanging in there, James. All right, let me get out of PowerPoint here. Okay, so this is like a topic map, which that's a little, you can just take it.
I just wanted to ask you how many times you called last
Okay.
night. I don't know what.
Oh, gotcha.
Sorry
Yeah.
about that.
That's okay. Three times.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I don't need it. Thank you.
All right, so this is a topic map which kind of shows a framework for the kind of big Uber strategy that I'm proposing. Each horizontal layer is a category. You haven't seen this before, Stephen, have you? And by the way, I can't see you right now, unless I do a little trick.
No, sorry, I was shaking my head. No, I haven't seen it.
Okay, sorry, I can't. By default, by default, I can't see people when I'm on screen share, unless I do a little trick. But anyway, so each horizontal layer is kind of a major category of topics. So we have root causes. So the left column is the category name. So we have root causes being the bottom layer. Chronic world problems is the next layer. Acute world problems, the next one. Mega solutions, big problems call for big solutions. And then meta solution, which is the goose that lays the golden eggs of the actual solutions, big, large, and small, but with a particular focus on the mega solutions we need right now, given the urgency of our acute problems and our chronic problems. So the slide kind of speaks for itself, but root causes from evolutionary history through totalitarian agriculture. Thank you, Daniel Quinn. The fundamental psychic problem of separation from each other, separation from nature, unleashing all these dark forces. And welcome, Denise.
Yeah, I always look at these things, and the one thing that always seems to be missing is the Gilligan problem, the Gilligan effect.
How would you characterize that?
You would have to be familiar with the show Gilligan's Island.
I am intimately familiar. So, and
yeah, well, you know all the plots then. There's only one plot. That's the joke.
Right.
The Gilligan problem is somebody who's well-meaning, who discovers a way off the island, that they got them on the island in the first place, but then in the process of helping them get off the island, it defeats the method for getting off the island, and therefore you're back to the beginning again. The show starts over again. And that's the whole, all seasons wrapped up in one phrase. So the Gilligan problem is that the person who's caused the problem solves the problem, then causes the problem again. Then there's this gratitude grief cycle of all the collaborators.
But why is it a foregone conclusion that the folks who solve the problem will then, create it again? I mean, let's take.
Yeah, it's kind of like to every solution there's a problem. I mean, we there's these cycles of behaviors that and sometimes we see our solutions as being what saves us, but then we end up in this cycle where the solution creates a new problem that sometimes is bigger than the original problem. Often, actually.
Right.
I think that's sometimes called unintended consequences. Right, and it's often an aspect of our rationality, the incompleteness of our problem solving, because we live in our heads and we have rational solutions to problems that require something greater than just rationality, and so we cause unintended consequences. Have you ever heard of that particular phrase?
Yeah.
I was disappointed. My connection can be unstable, and I didn't hear part of what Stephen started to say about the only thing missing in your chart, because I love the organization of that slide that you put up, but I was looking at like root causes, and I'm thinking I think there's like stuff missing here, and it's either like systemic, some articulation of the systemic roots. Misogyny, patriarchy, projecting God in the sky. Those are the things that come to my mind. I don't know what Stephen said because he cut out on my machine in that moment. So I'm jumping in because I was curious.
Well, no, your interpretation was very good of the unintended consequences, but the reason I used the theatrical note called Gilligan is because it's enveloped with human ambition, human need to get out of this trouble spot they're in, and just the cycles that's going on. So it's almost like the graph needs to almost be this animation with all these different forces involved. And a lot of people get into this scenario when we talk about security of the bad actors. And I used to make a joke. It's like, someone comes to your system and says, you have a hacker in your system, and saying, yeah, I know, but they do such good work and they always clean up after themselves. And the admin's just happy that they clean up after themselves. Because now my job's easier. But so there's all these behaviors that work in combination, and how do we know we're just not in a churn, and how do we know we're actually progressing? And we get in really blurry space like that, and we're now in our monkey brains. We're themed a lot. We're inventing reasoning. We are in where the popular form of entertainment is the inventors of reason. So whatever you can, whatever weird facts you can pull together and make a reason why they are related, it's an invention. But it's entertaining, and we sell it as a solution. But if you're really to put the thing into into action, it will fall apart instantly and probably make a bigger mess in the human behavioral repercussions that follow.
So anyway, and welcome Denise. Feel free to jump in. We're just kind of more or less free flowing here. I'll screen share it and share a bit more about what I was sharing a minute ago. And by the way, did you see what was on the screen right when you jumped in? It was a slide. Had you seen that before, Denise?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay, I'm just going to do a super brief kind of overview of that, and then I'll share some new stuff. But I also want to incorporate in what I'm saying an answer to your question, Stephen, or challenge. And my answer would be my offer would be that we nonetheless need to do something, right? We're always doing something anyway, so we might as well figure out how to do the best thing we can possibly do collectively. And this framing helps me for that, and I'll get more specific about what I mean by that in a moment. But anyway, root causes, and by the way, I forgot to mention, this map does not self-represent as being complete. It is the beginning of a map, and so really at the bottom of each of these layers, there'll be like a plus sign that you can click and see more. And I love what you said, Michael. So we'll add those things in. Chronic world problems, I wrap up a big, and some of these are big baskets like this one. Our entire politics, economics, and our entire set of living arrangements as humanity is one giant basket of problems because it's led us to this point. And, yeah, there's some good things about the path that we've been on and all that. I get all that, and that's all good. But in aggregate, we're on an omnicidal death spiral right now, which has led to the acute problems that are listed here. And this one in particular really has us on the ropes, planetary overheating, but it's all interconnected. This thing, which I'm not going to name because we've gotten dinged for saying it before, so we have to not do that. I usually call it Dos Equis now is the code word. But anyway, this is prompting economic collapse, which is prompting the reduction in global dimming, a form of solar radiation management, unintended, but nonetheless very potent, further driving the exponential of planetary overheating. So we need big solutions. We need SRM. We need to eradicate Dos Equis. We need a new story for humanity. We need all these, and this is another big bucket of economic and political transformation solutions in that bucket. And the goose that lays the golden eggs is I'm proposing is collective superintelligence. I don't think there's any other option at this point. And that leads me to some other slides. This is the new stuff under development, but let's just start with the top there. And on the topic of the urgency and criticality of collective superintelligence, these would be three subtopics. The first two create the space for challenges to my fundamental thesis that CSI is the only way at this point, the only way forward that has a chance at us surviving as a species and as complex life. First challenge is CSI impossible? All right, let's talk about that. Is it possible but unnecessary? Let's talk about that if folks want to. And finally, I believe it's both possible, necessary, and urgent. So on to what it is. What is collective superintelligence? The first thing to acknowledge is there's a lot of different forms of it, a lot of different possibilities. Cesare, who is on, has a form of it that's very powerful called Agora, and the International Logic Party. We have a forum called Radical Collective Intelligence, which we've been pioneering on Radish and are putting to use right here in the Solution Club. And ultimately, where I think we need to get to is a federation of different CSI communities of all the different kinds, because all are valuable. And it's really the combination, the federation of all the collective superintelligence communities and platforms, et cetera, that are going to result in true planetary collective superintelligence. So what is Next topic, what is Radish's contribution to all this? What is radical collective intelligence? It starts with the conversational domain, which is what we're in right now. This leads to visions for global transformation, which is a lot of what we talk about. And my latest big effort is to map all of this, the visions, all the things we're talking about, what we should be talking about but aren't yet, map it all out in one giant taxonomy, which is what really all of these slides are all about. This is all part of the taxonomy for global transformation as kind of the big context for the whole thing. The next part is a solution engine, which has many subparts, many components, and that's a whole other topic for another day. Of the solutions which are generated, we need to model them with a view to ultimately coming up with the optimal set, holistic set of solutions, which is kind of the holy grail of all this, in my humble understanding. And then there's some kind of slides under development. I often write things out on pencil and paper before I put them into PowerPoint. So the first part of this, which is where we are now, which is, I believe, is literally where the battle will be won or lost. If we can put together a proper planetary conversational domain, network of conversations, a social network of actual conversations, which is what Snackbar is intending to provide an example of. So what is this conversational domain? And, you know, kind of playing off of Google's mission to organize the world's information, we're all about orchestrating, architecting, and organizing the world's conversations. The first two words are definitely overkill. Conversations are happening. So it's really more about organizing them, but architecting really a framework, you know, topical taxonomies like what we're looking at right now. Anyway, and subtopics under the conversational domain are communities in conversation, like the one we're going to take a field trip to see at 4 o'clock, which is coming up in 20 minutes or so. So we'll take a field trip to the What's Now. Denise, I think you might have mentioned What's Now to us. Anyway, I can't see you guys right now. Actually, I'm gonna do this trick so I can see. Okay, now I can see you all. Thumbs up, Denise. Did you tell us about What's Now? Anyway, okay, great. Anyway, it's all good. Taxonomies like we're doing right now, context and framing for conversations. And for example, the Gilligan's Principle is a great one for the context. Hey, you know, it's great that we talk about all this, but, you know, are we including this? Well, let's include that in the context. Type, you know, which is our fundamental humility. And what do we do about that? You know, how do we be fundamentally humble as opposed to fundamentally hubris, etc. Types and classes of conversations. This is an example of a long form type that's quite broad. Navigation and search through taxonomies, topics, and conversations. So this whole topical map is meant to be the beginnings of a navigational structure based on the taxonomies. Strategic vectors within the conversational domain. I think, you know, so one strategic vector is getting this concentration precisely on CSI, collective superintelligence. And anyway, but that can mean a lot of things. Federation of communities and conversations, that's what I was talking about earlier, building this federation. Cultures, rules, and philosophies of conversation. You know, anyway, this is a vast conversational domain. Just because I have a topic up there doesn't mean I know anything about it, other than that it needs to be on the map. And then I've got some other slides that are even in less developed stages of development, like this one on visions of global transformation. I won't even try to decipher that, but I'll just leave it up there for a few seconds.
Can you, I don't think we're seeing your screen right now because you may have switched. We're not seeing any changes.
Oh, no, I see it.
What do you see, Denise?
Oh, maybe I'm not seeing. I'm seeing right now goals and missions, assets, successes we can build upon.
Oh goodness. Okay, and Stephen, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I'm seeing the same thing, but I thought this is what you were talking about.
Oh my goodness. No,
Maybe
no,
you
no.
just
I
need
am,
to
I am
jump
so
down
sorry.
No,
And-
no, he's been moving on for sure. He's been talking about things that we haven't been seeing.
Yeah.
Okay, so the lesson here is if Jamin is lost in space, speak up sooner rather than later.
Oh, you're at the top bar type of thing. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So top bar here. All right. Whoops.
The thing
Okay.
that's so challenging about this is that when I see you explaining this, I'm seeing that the expression of these, you're really trying to talk about an evolution of a world as a being, collective super being, and
Yeah.
and this evolutionary process of all the microbes to humans to plants to humans to whatever. It feels like it needs a four-dimensional chart where you see the different expressions through lenses. You'd put up a lens, and that would show you a connection of certain behaviors and their evolution, and you'd have to look through the lenses to get the filtration of what a given point is. But in a sense, the question is, what are those three-dimensional trajectories that the behaviors of any said thing move beyond? Because I don't know if a negative thing is a positive thing. I mean, it's like one of my researcher friends who's like says, end of the day, I never know whether my most successful experiment means nothing at all, and my greatest failure is the most meaningful discovery. And yeah, so I see, like, we figuring out what are those three dimensions, and then we know the fourth is timeline. This is the march through time, and then how do we categorize behavioral elements and that kind of graphing, and then the tagging of the names of things at given points of timeline. An influential virus that we would see these perk up. They'd be different names, different viruses, but in a sense, it's the same mechanism. And so how do we see that? So I really commend you. This is a really wonderful chart you're creating. But then I'm sitting here, I'm like, oh, this is like a fourth dimensional graphing problem.
Totally. Well, I'll tell you what. Look, let me just go through those slides that I thought you were seeing, and I'll just go through them quickly since I've already talked through it. So, do you see the one with the top row only? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. Anyway, so these are the three subtopics I talked about. The first two just create space for challenging my fundamental thesis that CSI is urgent and critical if we're going to solve our problems. This creates space for two different types of challenges: impossible or possible but unnecessary. And then collective superintelligence itself. One topic is the different forms of CSI, acknowledging that there's a lot of different forms of it and portions of CSI, and that the rightmost image there, the Planetary Federation of CSI Communities. These can be communities which center around a given platform like Reddit or Wikipedia, or are simply emergent from the data in the web like Google, and it's not really a community but just a service, et cetera, et cetera. The field trip we're going to take in a little over 10 minutes will be to a specific collective intelligence community. And then at Radish, we've been pioneering a form of proto-collective superintelligence called radical collective intelligence, which contains these elements: the conversational domain, visions for global transformation, which emerge from these conversations, like what we're talking about right now, including all the great challenges and additions that are coming up from Stephen and Denise and Michael, et cetera. And as we talk through these, it helps me tremendously to map it all out in a taxonomic framework. So, like everything we're seeing on all these slides, these are all elements of, these are all topics in a taxonomy. Another big part of it is the solution engine, which we've worked quite a bit on, and that has multiple facets, and we can talk about that on a different time. And then the modeling computer modeling, simulation of these different solutions, and simultaneously modeling whole sets of solutions as a combination, and with a note to Stephen, over time. So modeling implementation of different solutions according to a set sequence or schedule. And then if you build an optimization layer around the model, say a global model, then you can actually come up with an optimal set of solutions, assuming, but obviously garbage in, garbage out, depends on the quality of the model. Denise, you got your hand up, go for it.
Does everyone see that? I'm still pretty new to raising my hand here. I just, before the 10 minutes are up, I just want to say that I created something on a level like this several years ago, but it's more, I did specifications, and it's more coming from the health and wellness arena. And it's people that understand it, they call it the Google of health and wellness. And it's more like, it's coming to the conclusion of how to bring individuals together with like individuals on like thoughts and ideas according to what we're reaching out for in our needs as a personal human. What are our dreams? What are we trying to reprogram in our lives? So that's why I've gone super deep into meditation, seeing how the nervous system works. So yeah, so I just want to say that it's interesting to see this. And it sounds like Cesare just said he's also doing something like this. So it's like we have different models and in these different microbes or these different communities, these different leagues. So I'm just wondering, like, how do we bring these things about? I love what you're saying. I do know of a few collectives, and I highly agree that the super collective intelligence is what is necessary to bring on a higher dimension of life on Earth in a way that is coherent with our hearts. And there's a lot of people out there doing things individually, having their small groups, and there's a lot of people who are lost and can't find the connection. And how do we make these connections higher resolution and more resonance? And that's where gamification with some of the gamer creators, and then these different models of. So I'm just wondering, like, how do we get people to help make these things happen? Like, how many people do you have on your team right now? Like, I'm definitely into what you're saying and what you're doing, but I'm so into the health and wellness arena that I'm coming from this perspective of where we come from in that perspective of how do what perspective and frame am I going for as a designer, interface designer, user experience designer. I'm always coming from the person that sits inside the vehicle of the body, and then how do we create the world from there? So yeah, I just wanted to get that out there because I want to share this with people, but I don't know who, I don't know how, and I'm really inspired by how you're sharing it, and maybe I can send you the perspective, my perspective, or go through, we can have a meeting and go through it, or I could just have a meeting. I would rather have it be a private meeting and not like a recorded and public thing. So if anybody wants to have a meeting over my model, maybe I'll invite some more other people in and we can converse about it. But I also will only converse with people who are positive, just because that's what I need as a female and where I've been in my life. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I'm totally game to both have that meeting and be positive. And I'll just reiterate, as I do from time to time, if anyone ever wants to pause recording, all you have to do is that or say it, and I'll pause for whatever period of time. Cesare, yes. Mm-hmm.
I want to make a comment about that, Denise. I think if you only want to work with a certain group of people, you will never be able to solve global problems. That is a recipe for failure, because that means that you're uncomfortable with dissenting opinions and you're incapable of actually doing democracy. And really what